Digital Foundry is sponsored by MSI's new range of next-generation QD OLED gaming monitors, with 27 and 32-inch 16:9 displays alongside 49 and 34-inch ultra-wides. These high refresh rate screens feature a graphene film with a custom heatsink, gaming intelligence AI features, and MSI Care 2.0 OLED burn-in protection. Check out the video description to learn more about MSI's excellent range of OLED gaming panels.
Senua's Saga Hellblade 2 is the most visually accomplished game released in 2024 to date, and for me, it represents the most significant Unreal Engine 5 release after Epic's own Fortnite. So in today's video for Digital Foundry, I want to highlight the game specifically on PC to talk about its good and not so good technical aspects. Many developers this generation are going to be using Unreal Engine 5, and I actually think Senua's Saga shows some great highs and lows on PC that every developer can learn from. They can copy some things wholesale or avoid some things that are less savory. With this list of do's and don'ts I'm going to compile here, hopefully we can get some info out there to developers making UE5 titles and positively influence them. With that being said, let me start with those positive aspects in user experience and menus. Senua's Saga does something important before you even get in the menu. It gives you the opportunity to change important presentation options before the first game starts. I like this as it allows you to tailor the basic experience of the game before getting into it. More important though here is that the game on first start secretly starts pre-compiling shaders in the background while credits, warnings, and these options are on screen. On a Ryzen 7 7800X3D, the first time I played the game, I actually didn't notice that pre-compiling of shaders was occurring as the pre-compilation finished before I actually got into the main menu. On the aging and low-end Ryzen 5 3600 in comparison, it took roughly a minute and a half to finish compiling shaders. So there I noticed it and I was greeted with a compilation screen. Still though, that 1.5 minutes was largely unintrusive. Dedicated shader pre-compilation is very important to any title on PC, and especially Unreal Engine 5 ones. Every UE5 game should have a pre-compilation sequence as far as I see it. Ninja Theory's way of doing it here, stealthily in the background, before you get to the main menu, is probably the best way to do it. It is invisible to those with fast CPUs, and it is unintrusively long for those with slower CPUs. And based on my time with the game, this pre-compilation step does seem to cover all the major shaders used throughout the game, and I do not believe I saw any hitches or frame time spikes that could be attributed to just-in-time shader compilation stutter. Honestly, an Unreal Engine game should never have shader compilation stutter as far as I see it, as the engine now, as of the latest versions, has the tools to allow developers to collect all shaders in a game as long as the game has been thoroughly played by QA. So I would say the first lesson from Hellblade 2 is to pre-compile as many shaders as is humanly possible to ensure smooth performance on PC. After shader compilation, another thing that Senua's Saga does very right is its graphical options and the menu presentation there. Like my favorite ports to PC, Senua's Saga has a real-time graphical preview that works in a cool way. Basically, you scroll over to an option like global illumination as we see here, and then you hit the preview button. The background menu goes clear and you can see the game rendering in real time. There you have the menu option, just now isolated, and you can toggle it and change it in real time to see visual changes. UE5 developers out there should just straight up copy this menu style as I see it. If not with a preview button as they do it, then just have the menu background always be transparent. This graphical option style is perhaps the best one out there, but Ninja Theory went one step further here, and I'm an even bigger fan of what is happening in the top right after you hit the preview button. Here you can see the time it takes in milliseconds to render the frame on the GPU and CPU listed separately while you're changing the options. You can also see VRAM usage as well as frame rate and frame time of the frame when pure VSync is enabled. This is crucial as it will help users to learn what graphical options affect which component of their PC and whether or not they are CPU or GPU limited. This requires a bit of prior knowledge in that 33.3 milliseconds means 30 FPS, or 16.6 milliseconds means 60 FPS, but it's still the good information a user needs to figure out what is going on in their PC. For example, it allows users in this game to see how expensive something like reflection quality is. You see more reflections on rough dirt on high, lose them on medium, and then lose all reflections out of screen space on low here. All the while that is changing, you can see the cost in milliseconds changing noticeably on the right hand side depending upon the setting. This millisecond display here allows users to also understand those settings that are expensive but have little visual difference, such as volumetric lighting between medium and high here. A total of 27 milliseconds on high for this GPU and 23.5 milliseconds on medium, while the visual effect on the actual beams of light and shadow is more minimal. I love this millisecond meter, and I think every dev using UE5 should honestly look to copy it directly or conceptually with their own spin. The only thing I wish Hellblade 2 had here with this meter would be the ability for the user to toggle this meter while also playing the game and not just while in the graphics menu. If you could toggle it in game, its performance metrics could provide great insight into what aspects of your PC is limiting performance, CPU or GPU. Another thing developers should look at copying from Senua's Saga here are a number of the options it allows users to change in that menu. VSync, for example, is done very well. It offers full rate VSync, half rate, third rate, and quarter rate. So if you're on a 120Hz screen, you can lock the game to 60, 40, 30, or even, 20 FPS if you really wanted to. Ninja Theory also supports dynamic resolution, which in my experience helps a lot, as we can see here in this benchmark of the intro cutscene. A GPU like this one shown here cannot reasonably hit a high frame rate at native 1440p, but utilizing dynamic resolution, it does a comparatively commendable job, getting much closer to a steady 60 FPS. Dynamic resolution is rare on PC in general, and it is especially rare in Unreal Engine 5 at the moment, as the engine does not officially support it yet in public branches on PC, but that may change in the future, of course. Another thing every UE5 game should do is have the amount of image quality scalars that we see here. You get access to all the graphics card vendor image reconstruction techniques, as well as Epic's own TSR, so you have the choice of how you want the game to look. Generally, Ninja Theory are hitting all the right notes in the graphical options menu here, and other UE5 developers should just load up this game to see how they're doing it and learn from it. It is doing a lot right for that user experience, though I think it could be improved on, and here's where we'll get into some of the negative aspects found in this game's PC version that developers can perhaps learn from. A good example of that is in the graphics menu and how the menu styling functionally can lock users out of things there, which should be technically possible. DLSS 3 frame generation by its design can actually run with any upscaler or anti-aliasing technique, but since the menu here in Hellblade 2 only shows frame generation when you select image reconstruction done via DLSS, that means you can only use frame generation from DLSS with DLSS, and not with any of the other image quality options here. In the same vein, dynamic resolution scaling in this menu is only selectable when you choose Unreal Engine 5's TSR. In reality, every single image reconstruction technique that this game has, be it XeSS, DLSS, or FSR3, they all support dynamic resolution in their software development kit. Really, you should, as a user, be able to use dynamic resolution with any image quality treatment here. That is, of course, a bit of a nitpick, I will admit, but the menu does so many other things right that an issue like this one does stand out a bit. On a practical level, though, I definitely know a lot of Intel or NVIDIA users would love to combine XeSS or DLSS with dynamic resolution, which will be the image quality techniques which look and run best on their hardware. Another menu nitpick I have is not limited to just Hellblade 2. In fact, this applies to pretty much any UE5 title. In Hellblade 2, there is no option to turn on or off hardware ray trace Lumen, which Unreal Engine natively supports. Software ray trace Lumen is used universally on all platforms in this game, no matter the settings, and as my friend and colleague John showed off in his coverage, that means quality can be lacking as screen space tracing is used extensively to augment Lumen's quality and performance, so you'll get screen space errors in the lighting and reflections. The majority of UE5 games released to date do not offer the ability to toggle hardware Lumen, just like Hellblade 2 here, and I don't think that is the right way to go about it. While allowing for both hardware and software paths of Lumen requires more QA time to check that it looks and performs as expected, I still heavily recommend that all UE5 games allow for user choice there as long as it's reasonable. Hardware ray tracing is the future of the industry at this point, so even if certain graphics hardware might struggle with its increased quality now, users of the future playing a gorgeous game like this one will be grateful for its inclusion. Having forward-looking graphical options on PC is important, I feel, especially those options that are so easily and readily available in the engine, like with a checkbox as they are in UE5. And I think such options are a great priority for games that put such great emphasis on their visual fidelity, like this one does here. Keeping within the game menu here still, there are some other things that the game does not allow you to change, which it really should, such as post-processing and aspect ratio. Now I know this game is going for a specific artistic look. It's supposed to look like filmed actors and locations, hence the post-processing it does. But at the end of the day, post-processing is indeed an accessibility option. Ninja Theory definitely knows and gets this as they put motion blur, for example, in the accessibility options in Hellblade 2. It's nice that they do that, but they also do not allow the user to toggle other things that obfuscate the screen in similar ways, like depth of field or chromatic aberration. This game has a lot of those effects even in gameplay, and I do not think users should have to mod the game to turn these things off. It should just be in the menu. Similar to post-processing, Hellblade 2 does not allow the users to adjust the field of view or aspect ratio. Based on simple modding though, it's easy to see that the game looks and runs fine on a 16:9 screen. Yes, there's a higher performance cost due to more pixels in 16:9, and yes, the game is going to lose some of its specific cinematic presentation at a different aspect ratio or field of view, but such control over field of view is important for allowing users to feel comfortable. It is an accessibility option, once again, and should be found in any 3D title, and especially Unreal Engine ones, as it is easy to expose that control to the user. In the end, if it does conflict with artistic direction or causes a bug here or there, then it should be labeled as such with a warning if that is the case. I think most users are fine with some unintended jank due to an extended FOV, as long as it means they can play the game that way comfortably on their monitor without motion sickness issues. Moving beyond the menu and graphical options, which are kind of universal to a lot of games, drawing cross-game conclusions about performance is a bit trickier. Each and every game out there will have different performance profiles depending upon their design and what needs to be simulated or rendered. Still, I think there are aspects of Hellblade 2's performance profile that can be generalized across all UE5 games, like how well Hellblade 2 handles shader compilation. That positive aspect should be emulated by other games on UE5, and every other game on UE5 I feel should try and avoid all other sources of performance hitching. Hellblade 2, like nearly every Unreal Engine game out there, does have what I call traversal stutter, which looks like you see here. Essentially, you move through the game world and you cross an invisible boundary, which triggers the lump loading or deloading of some data, most likely, and when it is done in a lumpen kind of poor way, it leads to rapid increases in frame times. As we see here on the Ryzen 5 3600, it leads to a jerky visual appearance for a short period of time, aka a stutter as I always call them. Senua's Saga has this periodically throughout the game, no matter which hardware you're on. Bigger CPUs will still see it, just with smaller frame time spikes like we see here on the Ryzen 7 7800X3D, but the stutter or hitch is still there nonetheless, no matter your hardware. This game definitely has it less frequently than I've seen it in other Unreal Engine titles, and it is honestly a bit hard to fault the developers here specifically given how universally it plagues all titles using this technology. But if we're going to be picky here, we have to say it doesn't happen on Xbox Series X in the same scenarios. Given that it doesn't happen there, we know it is technically possible to sidestep the issue somehow. And really, more attention should be given to this issue specifically on PC, as it can show up even on the best hardware out there. So Unreal Engine 5 developers, please examine how and why and when loading and deloading is occurring in a game so as to reduce or eliminate traversal stutter as much as possible. I definitely think it takes users out of the experience and frustrates them. Another source of frustrating hitches for users in many games comes from how memory is managed, and unfortunately I think Hellblade 2 suffers from this issue. In my experience, I discovered that 8GB GPUs in this game will see large frame time spikes that coincide with certain events occurring that don't happen on other GPUs. A good example can be seen in the game's opening with an RTX 4060. When this wave comes crashing down on Senua, it causes a huge spike here that completely would take a user out of the experience, even though it was just running at 60 FPS a few months before. This behavior is found all throughout the game in my testing on the RTX 4060, where it's like a great 60 FPS and all of a sudden the frame times go bad, and it leads to a poor level of smoothness and feeling across the entire game. Another frame time spike that occurs in this game is just before you get control of Senua, each time after a cutscene. There's always a frame time hitch, usually in the realm of 70 milliseconds on the RTX 4060 in this configuration. These spikes in frame time and issues with fluidity that I found on the 4060 do not occur at all to the same degree on GPUs with more VRAM, like the RTX 3060. That GPU is in fact slower in shading than the RTX 4060, as we can see here in this scene where the 3060 is below 60 FPS quite a bit, while the 4060 is running the scene with a better frame rate. But unlike the 3060, the 4060 has stability issues that I pointed out earlier. In the moment where the 4060 suffers a 400 millisecond hitch, the 3060 comparatively just has a couple of dropped frames next to each other. And that 70 millisecond hitch when you get control of Senua for the first time always, that is just a single dropped frame from 60 FPS on the 3060. So that extra 4 gigs of VRAM is making the game so much more stable in terms of frame times. Other 8GB GPUs suffer from the issues I showed on the 4060 to different and generally lesser degrees. Basically, the more PCIe bandwidth and memory bandwidth an 8GB GPU has, the smaller hitches will be. A 2070 Super with nearly double the memory bandwidth of the 4060 has the hitch size reduced by half. The 3070 with the same amount of memory bandwidth as the 2070 Super, but double its PCIe bandwidth, reduces the frame time spike in half again. So the size of these hitches will change based upon GPU hardware, but any and every 8GB GPU will still suffer from them, and it is disruptive to the gameplay and cinematic experience. The only way I found to reduce them, to make them less obvious, is to have the game run at 1080p output and dropping the textures to low. As we can see on the 2070 Super here, by dropping the game to 1080p and also dropping the textures to low, as we can see on the far left, the frame time spike becomes a mere blip in comparison to how it was earlier. Unlike The Last of Us Part 1 or Forspoken at launch, the low quality option for textures in this game does not meaningfully affect texture quality presentation in my investigations, but I would still say that is an unintuitive fix to have to reduce resolution so dramatically and to have to reduce texture quality so much. Even with that graphical menu having a VRAM meter as it does here in Hellblade 2, I think a casual user with an 8GB GPU would be a bit confused as to where those hitches are coming from, especially if they haven't done extensive testing or if they lack extensive knowledge of rendering techniques. I think the casual user here would just not know what's going on. Given how the vast majority of popular GPUs on the Steam's hardware survey only have access to 8GB of VRAM, I think it is imperative that PC games on UE5 or other engines ensure good experiences for such mainstream GPUs. That is going to be the baseline experience of a lot of customers. Either that means giving the users better information in the settings menu so they can avoid unstable performance, or it means profiling the game on mainstream hardware extensively to avoid such issues altogether. In this case, in Hellblade 2, I imagine that massive 400 millisecond frame time spike that occurs in the intro in this game on the RTX 4060 when that wave crashes down, well, it's probably an example of the game doing something less than optimal. With proper and consistent profiling on mid-range GPUs and CPUs with an emphasis on the smoothness of frame times, I imagine such hitches as I see here in Hellblade 2 could be ironed out and not even there at all. In the end, I want developers using Unreal Engine 5 to ensure smooth experiences with clean frame times for as many users as possible. There are many ways to achieve that, I think, but it is key to a good PC version. Good, consistent frame times means users can focus on the experience and not get taken out of it momentarily and then start thinking about performance. With that being said, I'm at the end of this video here on Hellblade 2. The game's PC version does a lot of great things like the menu, but it also misses out in some areas like frame time consistency that are key to ensuring great experiences for all users. Whether good or bad, other UE5 developers can definitely learn a lot from just looking at this game on PC, and I hope this video highlights that as well. If you did like this video, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. If you're already a subscriber, hit that little bell in the corner to be informed as soon as Digital Foundry posts a video. Support us on Patreon to enable more videos like this in the future. Comment below, follow on Twitter, and as always, this is Alex, bin you farewell und auf Wiedersehen.